Hello and welcome to Dish Shelved with Adam White. Last time I believe it was, I talked about Down Below Station and how I really enjoyed it. And I showed off that I'd gotten other books in the series, and including this one, Merchanter's Luck by C.J. Cherryh. And I went ahead and read them, and I started reading, and I've read three more books in a row in that series. And so I've started with Merchanter's Luck. I love the cover. It is actually even a scene in the book, which is always nice. And I don't think it says who did the cover. No. Oh yeah, it does. Barclay Shaw. Barclay Shaw did the cover to that. So really great cover. Really enjoyed the book. It's a lot different from Down Below Station. So while these are kind of sequels to that in a way, they're all standalone books. And this one is about a guy named Sandor who goes under a couple other different names, and he operates a small ship by himself, which is just almost unheard of because of what you have to go through to do your jumps and your faster than light stuff. And because the way she's got it set up with when they do what they call jumps and do the faster and light stuff, they have to take these tranquilizers because they can't be alert and awake during transit to that because it's not safe. And I don't fully understand it, but she's very consistent with it in all her books. And it's a lot more prevalent in this one than it was in Down Below Station, because in Down Below Station everything pretty much happened around the planet and the station. But there's a lot more jumping in this. Anyway, this guy Sandor meets Allison Riley, who's another part of another ship, and the Dublin again, and they have a little dalliance in one of the sleepover rooms that they have, because that's how people hook up, I guess, in the future, is that they just do it on layovers at dockside. And he really liked this girl, and he knew they were going to Down Below Station next. So he did something that, I mean, I still don't quite understand fully, but he did a jump and he actually got there ahead of them because he wanted to impress her. So, and which is really hard considering he had to do it all on his own because he didn't have a crew. So, he also does shady dealings because he uh, just has to do what he can to get by because he doesn't have a crew. And he just does what he does. And so they get entangled in his mess, and it kind of goes from there. And I don't want to say much more about it because that's the fun of the story, is finding out stuff as you go along. What is, but anyway, Merchanter's Luck, really good book, great follow up to Down Below Station. Uh, it really was a great book. I really enjoyed reading it, and like I said, completely different uh, from Down Below Station too. Also completely different from both of those is Rimrunners, and it's a story about Elizabeth Yeager, who I won't say what she used to be because it comes out as kind of a minor surprise in here, so I don't want to say and ruin anything. It happens fairly early on in the book, but she starts out at I think Viking Station, maybe. I don't know. I can't remember, but it's one of the stations that is just there's hardly anyone there. Ships hardly ever come in, and she wants a berth on a ship. And she sits in the what amounts to the unemployment office every day, the whole day, waiting to see if a ship comes in, if she can get a berth on it. And it's really about a really down on her luck person. And she seems competent. I think it said she's like 37 years old, so she's a little bit older than some of the other people we've dealt with in this. And she's just really down on her luck, really sad. She sleeps in a public restroom. Um, she gets into fights with people and does some other questionable things. And she hooks up with this ship called the Loki, which is kind of a spook ship, is what they call them. And they go around doing basically surveillance on stuff and trade in information. And she signs on as like a low end crew member and is trying to hide who she is throughout the whole thing. And she gains the trust of some other people, and they, it just, I can't say much about it because it would give some things away, and I don't want to do that because it was such a good book and I really enjoyed it. It was really different. It was more of a uh, kind of an almost not really military science fiction, but it had that flavor to it. And so it was different from The Merchanter's Luck in that sense. And it also dealt mainly with her. And as I said, with Down Below, you didn't get a lot of like internal dialogue with the characters. Um, you do in Merchanter's Luck, you do get to see kind of what at least is going on in Sandor's mind and somewhat with Allison Riley. But in Rimrunners, you really get to see what goes through Elizabeth Yeager's mind, and you get a lot more personal detail. And it's just a really nice change of pace. And it's a fantastic book on its own. And again, all these books are standalone. Now, the third one I read, and I just finished this yesterday, was Tripoint. And I'll show you the back cover because it's got the whole image on it. And it's about a guy named Tom Hawkins. He's, I think, 23. He's on a ship called the Sprite, which I couldn't help but think of the drink. But it's called the Sprite. And what you find out, also something that you found out in The Merchanter's Luck, and what was mentioned in Down Below Station 2, is that most of the merchant ships have families on them. They're run by families of people. And uh, like the females will go out when they're of the right age and have sleepovers at dockside and then end up pregnant with children, and that's how they fill out their crew as the time goes on. And that's just the way stuff works in this system, and it's really interesting uh, the way they treat it, and they're just like, that's just it. And it's like this Tom Hawkins, he was born on this ship, and the ship was the only life he knew. And he, when he'd get off on a station, he'd almost be uncomfortable because it was so different uh, from being on a ship. And he was like, I don't even want to go to a planet because it just, he wouldn't know how to act. And so it was really, it gives you a lot, especially in this one, of what it's like to be a spacer, to be born into it on a ship, and to do it your whole life. And he's got a mother, Marie, who is um, got some problems and hasn't treated him very well. I won't say why, but because it's part of what comes out in the book. And I don't want to say, I want to say even less about this one than the other ones. But it had a lot of Tom and what Tom was thinking. And, excuse me. And it just was really a really good book. And it was more of a learning about what goes on the merchant ships book. So it was different again from the other ones. And although you had a lot of merchant stuff on Merchanter's Luck, but you get a real sense of it and a sense of the why they do the tranquilizers during jumps and why it's important to be, in certain places on the ship when you're at dock and you can only go certain places. And it's it's just a really interesting story. Tom's a really interesting person in it. He's not he's kind of flawed, but it's because of his upbringing and his circumstances of his birth. And he ends up on another ship, and I won't say what ship or who it's with because that's part of the fun of the book. And he starts out as a prisoner, and then it ends up being a lot different from what he thought it was going to be. And it was really good. This was another one I had trouble putting down, and the tension builds in it really well. And I mean, it did in the other ones too, but in this one, it just is like I'd get to a point if I get to the end of a chapter and be like, man, that's just like wearing me out because it was just so tense, all the stuff and the action that was going on. And anyway, it ends up a lot differently than what I thought it would end up as. And it's really surprising. And I thought that was fantastic about it. And you really get a sense of the spacer life in this more than anything. And it was just great. And again, it was called Tripoint, C.J. Cherryh. And I've read all three of these right after I read Down Below Station. And as far as I know, I'm going to start on Finity's End, which is the fifth one, and the last of the so-called sequels to Down Below Station. But there's also two prequels. And then a kind viewer on my video noted that there's also two more prequels that were written later in like the 2010s somewhere, and so I'm gonna have to get a hold of those too. And I've got all three books for the Satine trilogy that runs in the same universe as these, and I plan on reading those. I don't know how many in a row I'll read. Probably at least Finity's End. I also wanted to say in this, where was that? Yeah, Elizabeth Yeager says in so what are you thinking? You can throw all that away, but past is never past, man. Past is, that's all. All you can ever get is now and what will be. And that's what I thought she really embodied um, in that book, is that her past, which she had a lot of it, uh, she just wanted to let it go and not have to deal with it anymore. And all she really had to do was look forward to what she had each day and what she had coming up for. And I thought that was a really apt thing for her character, to think that in here, because um, it just was really, uh, some of it was philosophical a little bit. But anyway, all three books, Rimrunners, Tripoint, and Merchander's Luck, all excellent, all by C.J. Cherryh. Fantastic follow ups to Down Below Station. Um, in Merchander's Luck, you do have a couple of people from Down Below Station show up for minor parts, but then they're not in either of the other books. So, like I said, they're not like direct sequels. They just take place after what takes place in Down Below Station. So you can read them all independently and really in any order. Although I would recommend Down Below Station first, because it's kind of like the catalyst to everything that happens in the rest of these. Anyway, I've taken up enough of your time. I hope you'll read these books and get the same enjoyment out of them that I did. And I hope to see you sooner than later. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you next time.